The first tool to show in HSGridder, which is sort of the main tool, the original tool for this software, is the Hotspot tool. So in the HSGridder menu in MapInfo, you've got this first one called Hotspot, in brackets KDE. So KDE stands for Kernel Density Estimation, which is a way of measuring how clustered the points are, or the density of them, with a smoothing applied to it. So here on the map, I've got some point data, which could represent crime data, and I want to identify where those points are clustered the most. If we have a look, we can see some areas which appear to be clustered, but the point with this data is you can have overlapping points. So you could have 100 points overlapping, which makes it very hard to see. So to run a basic hotspot, just run this tool, choose which layer is your point layer. So that's one called vehicle crime 12 months. And you've got this first option, study area defined by the mapper window extent or the entire table. So if it's the map window extent, any outlying points won't be considered, because sometimes data can have outliers. So whether that's because the coordinates had values of 0, 0 and it's plotted somewhere in the ocean, or you might just end up with a point from the other side of the country in your data. So this will exclude those, because if they're included, it can throw out all the calculations for the routine. If you do want to run it for the entire table, you've always got that option. So if you hit that, and you get these settings, the cell size, so it creates a grid over the whole area and splits that up into cells. So the cell size there doesn't really matter. The search radius does make a difference. If you're not sure, you can go with the default, which will be based on the spread of your data. And you can always hit this preview button. Sometimes it's a case of a bit of trial and error. So if we hit preview there, it will give us a look at what the hotspot surface is going to look like. So it's finding these areas where the points are clustered. Now with that search radius, currently set to just under 500 meters, if you go with a much smaller search radius, let's say 300 meters, you end up with these smaller localized hotspot areas that might not be as useful. If you set it to something quite large, set it to say a kilometer, 1000 meters, then from each grid cell, it's searching out much further and it's going to find more data, and you end up with this overly smoothed sort of blobby areas, which may or may not be useful. So for a lot of the time, the defaults are fine. You might want to round them off, or you might want to do a bit of trial and error with that. So from there, you can hit OK and get the basic hotspot, which will let you identify those areas of clustering that you can go in and explore more. Couple more options for this basic one is, you'll see here that it's currently showing the hotspots only. So it's only showing you the yellow and red areas. Anything with a lower value isn't being shown. You can select the full grid. So if you hit full surface and click preview, so there's the extent of the full grid. It's the minimum bounding rectangle of the points there. So you can set to that, and you can change any of these colors here too. So when you're on the hotspots only, you won't be able to change this bottom one because the bottom one's not being shown. Once you go to full surface, you'll be able to change that bottom color. So instead of white, if I change it to a light blue or something, hit preview, it's gone and changed. So if you prefer different colors, you can do that. And finally, you've got this translucency value. So you'll see here that the grid is covering the base map and the points. You can set this to something like 20%, and it will just make it that bit transparent, let you see the base map and the points underneath. So you can have a play with that. Once you're happy with the output, hit OK, and there's the output there. Now, if you want to change that translucency after, or the transparency, there is up here a little button that will let you do that. Alter transparency, it's currently set at 20%, so again I can change that. There's a preview button and you can have a play with it. And the other one that's up here is to view the hotspot settings. So if you can't remember how you made the the hotspot, you can click on this and it will tell you which table it was based on and what the different settings were to create that. After you've made it, if you want to change the search radius or the cell size, that can't be done because it's created, the actual output is sort of hard-coded into that. So if you do want to change those later, you'll have to close this existing one. So the hotspot surface which is created, it gets the same name as the point layer, but adds this HS underscore in front of it. So you know it's the hotspot surface of that. So you'd have to select that, table close that hotspot one, and then you can come back and rerun it, which will only take a few seconds. Now, a couple of slightly more advanced topics are being able to clip the grid to a boundary. So you saw that the grid covered all the points. If we've got a boundary, so it might be a police beat, and you want to clip the output to that, so it only considers points in there, and will also clip the grid to that. You can switch that on, but you also have to select the polygon. So if I come up here to spatial, use the select tool and select that. It needs to be selected because we need to tell the program which polygon it is that we're interested in, because you might have lots in the layer. So select that first. You can select multiple, so they can be 2 beats next to each other, for example. Then come back and run the hotspot tool. And now down here, you'll get this option to define the study area by third choice selected polygons or polygon. So that means that the output will be clipped to that. Hit OK. So now if we hit preview, it's looking similar. But if I now hit full surface and maybe change this color just to highlight, preview, you can see now that the grid is clipped to that polygon output there. And the last thing to show you is you also have an option of a weighting column. It's not used much, but it is an option there, so that if you've got each point isn't worth the same, so it might be like a dollar value attached to it, or it could be a severity score for traffic collisions, something like that, which says this point is weighted more than others. You can select that from the list, and the other option is to select by is to use a date. So what that means is if you use a date column there, then more recent events are weighted more than events that happened further away, happened longer ago. So if we did use a date column, for example, and then we can set a maximum time, so say there's 28 days. So what that means is that as it's finding points, if the point happened today or yesterday, it would be multiplied by a factor of 1, so given full weighting. If it happened 28 days ago, or it'd be given a very, very small weighting, and if it happened 29 days ago, it'll be giving a weighting of 0, so it wouldn't count. So it's just a way to weight things according to how recent they are, which can change the output, how it appears, because you might have an area with a higher volume, but they all happened longer ago, versus a smaller volume, but they happened quite recently. So there's different options there for how to create hotspots in HSGridder.